looking for independence, looking for curiosity, looking for ability to take feedback and desire to grow. I love ambitious people because you might as well be ambitious. It's hard to build something big. It's hard to build something small. Let's just go big.
Owning one business is challenging enough, but Serge Faguet is a partner in 5, ranging from a video communication platform to a company using AI to develop medicine. I'm Alex Freeman, the host of the Upflip podcast, and on today's episode, I'm talking to Serge about how to simultaneously partner in multiple multi-million-dollar businesses. From how he financed his businesses to the systems he's using and how he built his team. I'll get the inside scoop on how he's grown his impressive empire. Serge, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Can you, just to start things off, can you give us a bit about your background? How did you become an entrepreneur and what led you to start your current businesses?
So I grew up in a family of scientists and then somehow got fascinated by technology at a relatively early age and then saw all the cool stuff that was happening and was being built in the tech space by young, exciting people. And then I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And it took me to Cornell and then to Stanford Business School for an MBA program. And then out of that, I started at first a few unsuccessful attempts and then a lot of other businesses, and it just became a career.
Could you give us an overview of what you would describe as your current businesses and what each one does?
So I'm a big shareholder in a bunch of companies. The biggest one is called Emerging Travel. It's one of the biggest B2B online travel companies in the world. We have close to 2,000 people working in the company. It's hugely profitable. I founded that back in 2010, 2011. And then there's a number of other things, other teams I've put together to work on around the concept of data-driven businesses that could gather a lot of information about our biology. And one of them is an AI drug discovery company that's developing new drugs based on machine learning of a lot of data from people's blood, essentially developing new drugs. Another recruits patients into clinical trials from small clinics. And another one is developing tools to help essentially high performance people manage their burnout through a combination of medical support, coaching, and psychedelics/therapy. And then there's actually several others. I have a business in London where I'm a junior partner that's a fintech, which essentially is a neobank for a particular class of cross-border merchants. I have another that's an AI application related to facial recognition, and another that's a Web3 project about decentralized identity. And actually, at the same time, the majority thing that I'm doing is I'm actually building international movement related to the future and to transhumanism. So it's quite a lot of very different things that I've co-founded and helped build over the last, over a decade now.
So with a lot of our guests who maybe own or are a partner in one business, we would ask them about the long-term vision for the company. But with your hand in so many different places, how do you think about that kind of long-term vision, I guess, for yourself? And how does that impact the businesses you choose to get involved with?
I think that my long-term vision is just vision of a very optimistic technology-enabled humanity. I think that very shortly we're going to develop very powerful technologies like AGI and molecular nanotechnology and fusion power and many other things. And the unifying theme of everything I do now is about what is the way to guarantee the best possible future for humanity. And with respect to why I've started the business that I've started. So I bumped into Elon Musk randomly at Cornell when I was 18 or 19 years old. He came to recruit just as he was launching SpaceX. It was 2004. And I managed to have a meeting with him. And it was just really impressive, really cool, because this guy just built this finance company and then started building rockets. And nobody knew him back then. So I was like, okay, I am doing that. So first I'm learning to make money and build companies. And my early companies were just purely commercial products. And then at some point, it started becoming more mission driven. So that's where I started working more around biotechnology and governance.
Elon Musk is a really interesting example as well of someone else who's doing this, because I'm also curious about doing these things as separate companies versus doing these things as part of the same overall umbrella. What are some of the advantages, disadvantages to going that route?
If you want greater scale as a person, you should be building ecosystems full of people building different things rather than a monolithic structure. At some point, I just realized, so I started out being the CEO of my own business, and I've worked in that role a total of, I guess, like 10, 15 years. And after that, I realized that I enjoy much more when I coach and mentor someone else into being a CEO. And actually, over the past 10 years, I have coached 6 CEOs and essentially built a business with them at the helm. At least 2 of these companies will be unicorns. And I also advised 2 other people from early on, and those 2 will be unicorns as well. And I think that's so much about building businesses and having impact and having scale is about trusting people and about having the right people around you. And that's how really you can manage to run multiple businesses at the same time. If you have great partners and you kind of bridge them and bring them your unique expertise, but they're highly independent, very mature people who could build this by themselves, it just maybe wouldn't be as cool.
Now, a lot of those skills in terms of coaching up people to be CEOs, there's some aspect of the CEO skill set that exists in you to do that. But can you tell us about the kind of specific skill set required to do what you're doing and how you went about developing those skills?
That's a really excellent question. There's a bunch of skills. I think I'll just name a few. One is just being able to deal with uncertainty, because at the very beginning of a business, so far I've been creating all these companies from scratch. And when you're creating a business from scratch, everything is liable to change. So you have to really be comfortable with creative chaos and with the fact that your models of the world are constantly being dashed with new feedback, yet you reassemble from that feedback. So I think that's part of it. And that's really about the search for product market fit and kind of exploration and not sticking to any particular framework too early. Another is just to do with people. You just have to have good social skills and to both understand people, so to empathize, and at the same time also to influence and inspire people, because that's an incredibly important thing. And finally, I would say that to do what I'm doing already, when it's kind of a point of leverage where I'm recruiting and coaching and mentoring other CEOs, at this point, it's really important to just recognize what you're actually like a genius at and not do anything else. And that's usually the stuff that you love doing and you would do it for free. And that's how you know it. And if you focus on that, you're going to be unique and everyone's going to want to work with you.
What's the most difficult part of running or being a part of running multiple businesses? And what's one of the strategies that you found to overcome that difficulty?
So the most difficult thing is context switching, because when you're thinking about Web3 identity, it's very different from thinking about the fundamental theorem of molecular biology and how something works on a protein level. So, and the solution to that is, again, people, to have the right people who are highly independent and who are really deep experts in that particular domain and who at the same time can communicate well to me and to utilize me well in expanding the capabilities of their businesses. You know, part of that is just also seeing things across multiple businesses. So anyway, that's the strategy. It's got to be about trust and about greater delegation to people.
If someone does want to build this kind of multi-business empire, they obviously have to start somewhere. And is there something that they should be doing with their first business to set themselves up for this kind of growth into that multi-business empire?
I think the absolute most important thing is to just, in that first business, partner up with really, really good people as investors, as employees, as partners. So I've been very fortunate because my first venture funded business, I dropped out of Stanford Business School when I was 22. And my first venture funded business got funded by Roloff, current CEO of Sequoia, and by essentially the entire PayPal mafia and the founders of YouTube YouTube and all of these guys. And so very early on, I was just plugged into that network, plus observing and learning from these very, very rarefied and elite people who have kind of seen how the best early businesses in technology were created, and essentially learning from them, seeing how they think. And the answer is really that you have to have the right mentors who are going to make sure, because if you're just building your first business in isolation and you don't have that many other people around you who are stronger than you, then you might just not learn enough because you just don't know that you could be doing lots of things at a better, more impactful level. So mentors.
A quick reminder to our listeners that you can hear more advice on how to start and run a business in a range of industries on the Upflip YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/upflip and check out those videos there. Serge, I'm curious about what your day-to-day looks like and how you're managing your workflow as you are switching from business to business in what you're doing.
It's mostly just the biggest tools are just phone calls and messages. So some part of the time I'm just syncing up with all the different leaders of these organizations and building a relationship with them and seeing what I can help them with right now, whether that's an introduction or it could be just emotional support and help for them while they're dealing with a complex, challenging issue. So I think it's just the most important tools are whatever you use to manage your relationship with multiple people at the same time.
What are some of those main KPIs or metrics that you're tracking across your businesses?
In early stage, you really just need to be tracking how much cash you have and how fast you're burning it and what milestones you have to achieve for the next round if the company is not profitable, which most companies early on are not. And you just have to keep reminding people about that. Other than that, I mean, it's also about just the emotional states of the CEO and the team and the level. It's not really a KPI, but actually when I was in Y Combinator with one of my companies, they asked us to update on a weekly basis two things. One is how much cash we have and how much we're burning. And the other is how well do we feel about what's going on a scale of 1 to 10. So those are actually, like, when you're agnostic about the specifics of the business, those are the two most important things.
Do you have for lack of a better phrase here, a system to evaluate business systems as you kind of like look at the companies you're involved in, maybe to assess whether or not a system needs improving?
It's mostly based on intuition. It's just I have conversations with people and see and just like pay attention to how I feel. And when I feel that I'm unhappy about something or I'm angry about something, I'll make sure to voice that, because I think that essentially emotional feelings are actually very, very good things to base judgment on, because they're the result of deep subconscious neural networks that analyze quite a lot of data, especially things like social cues and, is the person confident? Is the person feeling good about what's going on? So I pay attention mostly to that, and also asking questions about the business. And if any questions that I, as an outside person, can come up with that are completely unforeseen by the management of the business, where they just don't have the answers, that is a signal that something is going wrong. Because the majority of my questions, even though I'm a really smart guy, the majority of my questions are going to be questions that a good team that is focusing on this full time will have thought of already on a number of occasions. And if that's not happening, that's an issue. So I kind of pay attention to things like that. And mostly it's just about having conversations with people live and taking it from there.
When an entrepreneur makes the move from owning one business to two and then ultimately more, what's one of the common mistakes that people make when they make that move, and what should they be doing instead?
Yeah, this has a very simple answer. I mean, people should just be delegating more, because once you're running two businesses, unless they're identical, you have less opportunity to dedicate energy to one of them. So essentially, you have to be delegating more. So you have to make sure sure that you partner up with people who are highly independent, who are highly proactive, and who could be awesome entrepreneurs by themselves, perhaps with some mentorship, perhaps with some early advice, and or just some other thing that is unique about you that you bring to the table. So for example, I get extremely passionate about businesses that I start building. And that passion, it's not like something that lasts for a super long time, but the amount of energy I dedicate to the business helps the business come together, and then other people pick it up going forward. So I think the biggest mistake that people make as they go from one business to more businesses is they don't delegate enough. And actually, I would say that that's the biggest mistake I see in businesses, period, is not delegating more.
Can you talk to us about the differences between buying into a business that has already established itself in some way versus being a part of the very, very, very early stage founding team?
I mean, I've actually never bought businesses, so I only have the experience of just starting them from scratch. But I think that when you start something from scratch that does not yet exist, it's a very, very high level of uncertainty, essentially creative uncertainty that you have to manage because you're trying to create something where nothing existed before. And this is a very tricky process, and a very weird process that is both art and science. But what's cool about it is that if you manage to know how to do that, you create an enormous amount of value in a relatively short period of time, because you can just set up more businesses and pull together from 0 to 1 to a small team, which has some money and has some idea and has some passion and has good relationships with each other. And that's already a proto company. And I think, I'm just pretty good at this.
Can you talk to us about your planning process of when you're getting ready to start a new business and why those steps might be important?
The planning process. So I usually just start trying to write down how I would describe the idea to someone else. And at first, it's just random notes on a piece of paper or in a bunch of files. And then you can craft a short story, essentially a paragraph about what this is and why it's cool and why we should be doing this. And then you start telling the story to other people. And some of those other people will get excited and potentially join your team, and other people will dash your ideas and thus provide you with additional information. And it's a very unpleasant experience to have your ideas dashed, but you have to essentially take that as feedback from the world that you need to modify the thing. And essentially, I think that is the most important stuff to address here.
Once you kind of have that in line and you go to launch in year one, what are some of the key things that a new business owner should be doing in year one to make sure they're on track to hit 7 figures?
To really build a scalable business, you just have to spend a lot of time with your customers and improve the product that you have in line with their desires. And the picture of the customer is actually correct and not something that you made up and that you think is true, but actually you're just not listening to the customers enough and you're more playing into your own illusions about the world. So I think that you just have to be really close to reality, and the reality is really the customer.
How did you go about financing your first business? And then how did that change for the later businesses? And is there a particular financing approach that you prefer?
I've always raised a lot of venture capital. My first business, TalkBox, Sequoia Capital invested $4.5 million into it. And later businesses, I've raised more than $100 million in venture capital by now. And that's a really good source of financing for startups.
So this is going to bring us to a section of our show we call our Fan Blitz questions. These questions come from our YouTube community. Again, you can go to youtube.com/upflip, join the community, and post questions to future podcast guests. So Serge, we're going to try and get through 5 questions in about 60 seconds here. Here we go. What's the biggest misconception people have about your position?
That it's possible to know how things will turn out and that it's possible to predict the future.
At this stage of success, what advice would you give to your teenage self?
To chill the fuck out.
What's the biggest purchase you've ever made?
Biggest purchase. I bought a Ferrari 430 Spider convertible a while back.
In 3 words or so, what would you like to tell all the naysayers now that you've made it this far?
Optimists get things done.
I love that. I love that. I want that on a t-shirt. Last one here. Can you tell us about your most bizarre business encounter?
I would, but it is truly bizarre and it's going to be too weird for this show.
Fantastic. What a tease. Look forward to the tell-all memoir that you'll write one day where we can get that story. That's going to do it for our Famblets questions. Again, those come from our YouTube community, youtube.com/upflip. Join the community and pose questions to future podcast guests. Serge, just a few more questions from me. You've made mention of how important the team that you surround yourself with is. So what do you look for in potential hires and team members, and what's your best strategy for finding and hiring the right people?
What I mentioned already, which is looking for independence, looking for curiosity, looking for ability to take feedback and desire to grow. I love ambitious people because you might as well be ambitious. It's hard to build something big. It's hard to build something small. So let's just go big. And in terms of the strategy for finding and hiring employees, I think it's very much what we were talking about earlier, that when you're starting the business, you should constantly be telling your story to other people and evolving the story using their feedback. And you're just going to find people who want to work with you very quickly through the grapevine. It's basically a social network search.
Once you have great members on the team, how do you keep them around? What's the most effective employee retention strategy?
I'm a believer that people care about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. There's a great TED talk on this idea. And autonomy means people decide how they work by themselves. I think that aggressive controls of employees and micromanagement of employees is very counterproductive. Mastery is about the ability to improve and the ability to grow your skills. So it's always important to have people who have not done the job that you're recruiting them to do before. Because actually, so I used to think that, hey, you should find people who did exactly this and did it successfully, but that person's going to be bored because you have to find someone who wants to take the next step. And the third part is purpose, which is really to be part of something that is greater than ourselves. And I think it's really important for any business and other enterprise to be thinking about the why and the mission and why am I doing what I am doing and not anything else.
How would you describe your leadership style, and why do you think that's an effective style for running multiple businesses?
So my leadership style is I trust people a lot. I am an optimist who's high energy and can energize people when they are down. I am quite ADHD, diagnosed ADHD, so I just like context switching, and I'm good at switching context and juggling a lot of different things. And the other thing is I'm very vulnerable about my own weaknesses. So for example, I know that in most cases, I just don't stick around long enough in businesses because once it starts becoming operational and work, I just get bored. So it's really important in that kind of context to build the right relationship and the right expectations with the right kinds of people, knowing what you know about yourself. So I think super important leadership wise to just do psychotherapy and meditate and all the other stuff that helps with self-insight.
Kind of along that same line, I'm curious about a work-life balance, or however you might want to phrase that sort of concept. It's hard enough for people that own and operate one business, but when you've got your hand in multiple businesses, how do you avoid burnout?
The way to avoid burnout in my particular circumstance has been really just to do the stuff that I liked and not do the stuff that I don't like. And actually, I do not have a stressful life at all, even though there's all these businesses and there's all kinds of challenging personal issues that I've had over the past couple of years. But really, it's not stressful because I have good relationships with the leaders of these businesses, and we trust each other and are developing this trust further. And there's plenty of time to rest. I try to also pay attention to what my body and what my energy levels and what my creativity levels are telling me. And if I don't feel like I have the right mental state and emotional state to solve a particular solution, I will just say, okay, I'm not going to do it. And the thing is, I can't actually force myself to do it anymore. I don't really like applying willpower power to myself in that way. And as a result, kind of find your niches.
Do you have any daily habits that you think other multiple business owners should develop, and why might that habit be beneficial?
Meditation. When I'm not sure what to do next on any topic, I meditate. When I'm stressed or overly excited and want to be a little more relaxed, I meditate. So meditation is amazing. It takes a long time to really get good at it and understand all of the nuances of it, but that is a really, really good daily habit.
What's been your biggest struggle as a business owner, and how did you overcome it?
It's just the fact that I'm disorganized. I'm not a good operator. Like, I'm not someone who knows how to run the same meeting over and over week by week and prepare the agenda and make sure that everything is executed and get the trains to run on time. I'm not good at that because I really don't like doing it. And the way that's fixed is, as with most questions in our interview today, is just people. You have to partner with people who are good complements to yourself. And then, because everyone has strengths, everyone has weaknesses. And as a result, we should find people who complement ourselves and with whom we create something greater than the two of us separately.
You've made mention of networking in multiple answers and kind of throughout this interview. I'm curious about what kind of networking you might recommend to a young entrepreneur early on in their career. What should they be doing? How should they be going about that networking, and why?
I think that people should just try to figure out what they love, whether that's music or a particular topic that they want to write about and are passionate about, or a particular business idea, and just like figure that out very early and do things that get other people excited. And usually if you love something, there's going to be other people who love the work that you do on it. And that's the best source of networking. And aside from that, it's really the same process. So you always, when you're working on a business, you craft the concept and you keep telling that concept to that story to everyone you meet who's relevant. And then they will say, oh, I heard so-and-so is doing something similar. You should talk to him. And that's how you quickly build a network and quickly find the right people. And the last important thing on this is to be you never know who you're going to need in the future. So treat everybody well. That's something I haven't done enough of in my youth, and it's always been something I regretted.
In hindsight, what would you say has been your smartest business move?
I think it's switching from being CEO to being someone who coaches many CEOs, because once you're working at the level of creating many businesses, it becomes more diversified. It's very interesting because you're, at least like, I'm context switching. So essentially, it was a very, very good fit for my ADHD personality. And that's the reason why it was the smartest business decision. If I were different personality-wise, something different would have worked for me. So there's not a universal answer.
What's the next goal for your businesses, and what are you doing now to achieve it?
The next goal for all early stage businesses is essentially to get the next round of funding or to get profitable on existing funding. And then for one of my businesses, the big question is just like how to structure for an IPO and deliver liquidity to the shareholders.
If you could pick the one thing that people take away from this interview, what would it be?
Be yourself. Figure out what makes you tick. Figure out what you love. You don't have to copy anybody else. You can be a very, very unique, talented person, regardless of the specifics of your talent. So I think it's extremely important to just discover what makes you tick, what you're really a genius at, what you love, and focus on that.
What's your favorite business book and why?
My favorite business book is The Sovereign Individual. It's a book that was written more than 20 years ago. It's about a lot of the transitions that are happening right now, where we're switching from a world of a bunch of geographical nation states to a world where nationalities are no longer relevant, and a lot of people are truly international and truly more sovereign than people people in the past. So that's one of the best books about business, but also philosophy and morality and other things that I've ever read.
Serge, where can people find out more about you and the work you're doing?
The best thing to do is to subscribe to me at sergefaguet.com, which is sergefaguet.com. And that's going to have links to my Twitter, SergeW1, and also to sign up for my mailing lists. So Twitter and mailing lists are a good way to keep in touch. And please subscribe. There's a lot of things that I'm working on right now that will be publicly interesting. And I anticipate lots of fun stuff in 2023.
That is going to do it for this episode of the Upflip podcast. A reminder to our listeners, you can find out more advice on how to start a business the right way on the Upflip Hub, or check out the listings on our website to find a business that's already up and running and ready to start making revenue for you. Serge Faguet, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good one.